No one warned the galaxy that humans didn't fear predators the way everyone else did. If they had, the silence that followed would have made more sense. If they had, the screams wouldn't have echoed through the transport bay. And if they had, maybe the strongest warriors in 3 star systems wouldn't have frozen in terror at the sight of a wagging tail. The Galactic Academy of Interspecies Relations was supposed to be a place of calm, a place of learning, a place where warlike instincts were set aside in favor of understanding. It floated quietly above the gray-blue moon of Velar 7, far from any claim of ownership, neutral ground for a divided galaxy. 12 star systems sent their brightest minds here. Some students were centuries old. Some had survived wars before Earth had even invented radio. Others glowed, floated, clicked, or breathed gases that would kill a human in seconds. And among all of them sat Jake Hollis, 19 years old, human, from Ohio. Jake had learned early that being human at the academy meant being invisible and noticeable at the same time. Invisible when it came to respect. Noticeable when it came to weakness. Humans were new, barely 8 years since first contact, and the galaxy hadn't decided what to make of them yet. Most species assumed not much. Jake sat in his xenobiology class, shoulders slightly hunched, surrounded by beings twice his size and 10 times his lifespan. His classmates whispered in languages he couldn't pronounce. Some had claws that tapped against desks. Others had eyes that never blinked. A few watched him openly, curiosity mixed with something close to pity. At the front of the room stood Professor Rextal, her armored body casting sharp shadows beneath the lights. She was KTH, an insectoid species with multiple eyes and mandibles that clicked softly as she spoke. The translation collar around her neck turned those sounds into clear speech. Next cycle, she announced, we will conduct a practical examination. The room stirred. Each student will present a companion animal native to their home world. We will examine interspecies bonding and domestication behaviors. Excitement rippled through the class. Jake blinked. A companion animal. Beside him, Zanara's skin shimmered bright yellow, her species' sign of delight. She leaned closer, her voice soft. I'll bring my lumen. They sing when they're happy. That sounds nice, Jake said. She smiled. What about you? Jake didn't hesitate. My dog. Her skin shifted to a thoughtful blue. Dog. He's furry. 4 legs. Big heart. Been with me since I was 5. From across the room came a low, booming laugh. Krellick. The Morvathian was impossible to miss. Nearly 8 feet tall, for thick arms crossed over a chest like carved stone. His species were known fighters, proud, aggressive, and unimpressed by newcomers. The human brings a pet, Krellick announced loudly. How charming. Laughter followed him like an echo. I'll bring a Varric hunter, Krellick continued. A real companion. A predator bred in the death swamps of my world. Jake stared straight ahead, jaw tight. He had learned silence was safer. Zanara reached out, her hand barely touching his arm. Her skin softened to pink. Ignore him. That night, Jake sat alone in his dorm room, stars drifting past the window. He activated the comm link, watching the static clear until his mother's face appeared. Jake, she said warmly. The loneliness cracked a little. They talked about home, about weather, about nothing important, until Jake asked, Mom, when you and Dad visit next week, could you bring Duke? There was a pause. Then a smile. He hasn't stopped waiting for you. Of course we'll bring him. Jake slept that night with an unfamiliar feeling in his chest. Hope. The transport bay buzzed with activity on examination day. Containers opened. Creatures emerged. Floating lights. Clicking insects. Armored beasts. Krellick's Varric hunter drew a crowd, scaled, sharp, deadly. Then Platform 7 lit green. Jake's heart pounded. The crate opened. And Duke came running. Big. Fast. Tail wagging like it might detach. Jake dropped to his knees, laughing as Duke collided with him, licking his face, whining with joy. Then the noise stopped. Every sound vanished. Jake looked up. Every alien in the bay had gone still. Fear filled the air. Even Krellick had stepped back, and his Varrock hunter, legendary predator, had flattened itself against the floor, trembling. Jake didn't understand yet, but the galaxy had just realized something terrible and wonderful. Humans didn't just tame predators. They loved them. The silence didn't break all at once. It fractured. A sharp inhale from somewhere near the ceiling. The soft whine of a terrified Varrock hunter scraping backward across metal flooring. The faint hum of security drones suddenly activating, their lenses locking onto Duke as if he were an unexploded weapon. Jake felt it before he understood it. Fear. Not directed at him, but at the dog sitting happily at his side, tongue out, tail sweeping the floor like nothing unusual had happened. Jake, Zanara's voice trembled. Her skin had gone completely pale, the color her species showed only in moments of extreme distress. You didn't say it was a hunter. Jake frowned, confused. He's not a hunter. He's just excited. He hasn't seen me in months. Professor Rextel approached slowly, each step measured. Her mandibles clicked softly, a sign of deep concentration or caution. Young human, she said, voice lowered. Please keep the creature still. Duke sensed the shift instantly. He sat. Perfect posture. Eyes locked on Jake, waiting. Several students gasped. He obeyed, someone whispered. Of course he did, Jake said, scratching Duke behind the ear. He's trained. The word hit the room like a shockwave. Trained. Krellick stared, all four arms rigid. You command it? Jake glanced up. I don't command him. We work together. The Varrock hunter let out a pitiful sound, claws scraping as it pressed closer to the floor. Its yellow eyes never left Duke. Professor Rextel's many eyes narrowed. This animal, it is not restrained. No, Jake replied. Why would it be? A murmur rippled through the bay. No shock collars. No control fields. No chemical suppressants. Jake felt suddenly very small. What exactly do you think dogs are? He asked quietly. No one answered. That was when the realization hit him. They weren't afraid of him. They were afraid of what humans considered normal. The examination was postponed within minutes. Not canceled, postponed. Duke was escorted, politely but firmly, to Jake's dorm room under heavy security observation. 3 different species of guards stood outside his door afterward, rotating shifts as if guarding a volatile artifact. Jake sat on his bed. Duke sprawled across his feet, snoring softly. This is ridiculous, Jake muttered. You didn't do anything wrong. Duke thumped his tail once in his sleep. The message requests started arriving almost immediately. Faculty inquiries, research proposals, emergency council reviews, and one personal message from Professor Galoon. Jake arrived at the xenobiology chamber an hour later, Duke walking calmly at his side. Galoon waited inside, his elderly frame supported by a hovering chair. His blue skin was muted, but his eyes were sharp with fascination rather than fear. Please, Galoon said, gesturing. Sit. Jake obeyed. Duke lay down automatically. You have caused disruption, Galoon said carefully. I didn't mean to, Jake replied. He's just my dog. Galoon's fingers tapped against the armrest. That phrase is precisely the issue. He brought up a holographic display, anatomical scans of Duke's skeleton, muscle density, jaw pressure. Apex predator classification, Galoon continued. Forward-facing eyes. Carnivore dentition. Pack hunting ancestry. Jake shrugged. Yeah, dogs come from wolves. The professor stared at him. You say that as if it explains nothing and everything. Galoon leaned forward. Jake Hollis, do you know what most species do when encountering an apex predator? Run. We build civilizations around avoiding them, Galoon said. Entire cultural doctrines exist to prevent proximity, and your species invited them into your homes. Jake thought of Duke sleeping at the foot of his bed, guarding nothing, protecting everything. We didn't invite them, Jake said slowly. We grew up together. That night, the rumors spread faster than light. Humans kept predators as companions. Humans allowed children to wrestle with them. Humans trusted creatures evolution had designed to kill. The phrase repeated across academic networks. A species comfortable beside death. By the next morning, Jake couldn't walk 10 steps without being watched. Some students fled hallways when Duke appeared. Others followed from a distance, curiosity battling terror. One Veloy fainted outright when Duke yawned. Zanara tried. She really did. She sat with Jake during lunch, keeping the table between herself and Duke. Her lumen hovered close, dim and nervous. "I want to understand," she said softly. "But every instinct tells me to run." Jake nodded. "That makes sense." She studied Duke. "Does he ever turn?" Jake blinked. "Turn into what?" "A killer." Jake looked down at Duke, who was licking crumbs off the floor. "No," Jake said. "He chooses not to." Zanara's skin rippled in deep blue. "That choice is what terrifies us." The confrontation came that evening. Krellick waited outside Jake's dorm room, posture rigid, arms crossed. Duke stood alert but calm. "I was wrong," the Morvathian said finally. Jake raised an eyebrow. About humans," Krellick admitted. "Strength is not in muscles alone." Slowly, very slowly, Krellick extended a hand. Duke sniffed it, then licked it. Krellick flinched like he'd been struck. "That means he likes you," Jake said. The warrior stared at his own hand in disbelief. "He trusts you," Jake added. Krellick looked at Duke again, not with fear this time, but respect. The galaxy was changing its mind. And it was only the beginning. The academy did not calm down. If anything, it grew more tense with each passing cycle. Security patrols doubled. Emergency meetings filled faculty schedules. News drones hovered near every public space, lenses tracking one human student and the predator who walked beside him like a shadow. Jake tried to pretend nothing had changed. He went to class. He took notes. He raised his hand when he knew the answer. Duke stayed close, either lying under Jake's desk or sitting at his side, calm and obedient. The dog didn't growl. He didn't bare his teeth. He didn't act aggressive in any way. That somehow made it worse. Predators were supposed to be unpredictable, violent, unstable. Duke was none of those things. He was disciplined. Professor Rextel addressed the class with unusual stiffness. Her mandibles clicked far more than usual, a sign Jake had learned meant stress. "Due to recent developments," she said, "the companion animal examination will resume in a controlled environment." Controlled meant the largest auditorium on the academy. Reinforced floors. Energy barriers. Medical teams standing by. Jake sat on the stage alone. Everyone else sat as far away as physically possible. Duke lay at his feet, head on his paws, eyes half closed. Professor Galoon stood and addressed the crowd. "This demonstration is not for entertainment," he said. "It is for understanding." A Kef scholar raised a trembling limb. "Professor, is the human in danger?" Jake almost laughed. "No." Galoon nodded slowly. "The greater concern appears to be the opposite." The first request came from a military analyst. "Human," the voice echoed through the chamber. "Has your species weaponized these creatures?" Jake stiffened. "No. Dogs aren't weapons." The analyst's eyes narrowed. "They obey commands." "They obey trust," Jake replied. "There's a difference." Professor Rextel stepped forward. "Demonstrate." Jake hesitated for only a second. "Duke," he said calmly. "Sit." The dog sat. "Stay." Duke stayed, unmoving, even as Galoon circled him at a cautious distance. "Come." Duke rose and padded back to Jake, tail wagging. A murmur spread through the room. No restraints. No coercion. No fear response. A Veloy sociologist stood next. "Does the animal ever disobey?" Jake thought about muddy shoes, stolen sandwiches, chewed homework. "Yeah," he said honestly. "Sometimes." The answer confused them more than obedience ever could. Krellick watched from the edge of the room, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Duke. His Varric hunter remained caged outside the auditorium, refusing to move. "Why does it submit?" a Morvathian elder demanded. "Why does it not dominate you?" Jake met the elder's gaze. "Because he doesn't need to." That was when Professor Galoon requested the records. Earth's data poured into the Academy systems. Thousands of years of domestication. Wolves evolving alongside humans. Selective breeding. Emotional bonding. Chemical feedback loops, releasing hormones tied to trust and attachment. The room grew quiet as the realization settled. Dogs didn't fear humans. They chose them. And humans, Galoon said softly, chose them back. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He sat on his bed, Duke curled against his leg, while messages streamed in from across the galaxy. Invitations, warnings, requests. One message stood out. Galactic Senate inquiry, mandatory attendance requested. Jake stared at the words. I didn't sign up for this, he whispered. Duke lifted his head and licked Jake's hand. I know, Jake said. Me neither. Zanara visited the next morning. She stood just inside the doorway, skin glowing uncertain shades of blue and green. I watched the recordings, she said. All of them. And she took a careful step closer. Duke noticed her and wagged his tail, but didn't move. That creature, she said slowly, could kill most beings in this academy. Jake nodded. Yeah. And yet, she continued, voice steadying, he waits for your permission to move. Jake smiled faintly. That's trust. Zanara swallowed. Then, heart racing, she knelt. Jake froze. You don't have to. I want to, she said. She extended her hand. Duke leaned forward, sniffed, and gently nudged her fingers with his nose. Zanara gasped, not in fear, but shock. He's warm, she whispered. Duke's tail thumped. Her skin burst into bright gold. Across the academy, something shifted. Not fear. Curiosity. If humans could live beside predators, what else had the galaxy misunderstood about them? The Senate chamber loomed in Jake's thoughts. Because soon, the entire galaxy would be asking the same question. And Jake would have to answer. The galactic Senate chamber was nothing like the academy. Jake felt at the moment he stepped inside. The air itself seemed heavier, charged with authority and history. The chamber was vast, a colossal dome of layered platforms rising upward in concentric arcs. Thousands of representatives filled the seats, beings of metal and flesh, light and shadow, ancient species whose civilizations had risen and fallen before humans had learned to write. Cameras floated silently, broadcasting to trillions across known space. Jake stood at the center. Duke sat beside him. The contrast was absurd. A 19-year-old human in a simple academy uniform. A large Earth predator sitting patiently, tail sweeping the polished floor. The murmur rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. Some senators leaned away. Others leaned forward. A few activated personal shields without realizing they had done it. Jake swallowed. Professor Galoon stood nearby as an official academic witness. Zanara sat in the observer section, her skin glowing with anxious color. Krellick stood among the Morvathian delegation, posture rigid, eyes fixed on Duke with something approaching reverence. The Speaker of the Senate rose, an ancient being tall and thin, with translucent skin that revealed slow-moving veins of light beneath. Their voice echoed without amplification. Jake Hollis of Earth, the Speaker said, you stand before this assembly due to concerns regarding your species' relationship with predatory life forms. Jake nodded. Yes, Speaker. Specifically, the Speaker continued, this creature. All eyes dropped to Duke. Duke yawned. Several senators recoiled. Jake resisted the urge to smile. You acknowledge, the Speaker said, that this animal is capable of lethal violence. Yes. And you willingly remain within its reach. Yes. A ripple of disbelief passed through the chamber. Explain, the Speaker demanded, why you are not afraid. Jake took a breath. Because fear isn't the whole story, he said. Duke could hurt me. But he won't. Not because he's restrained. Not because he's forced. Because we trust each other. A representative from a reptilian species rose sharply. Trust is irrelevant against instinct. Jake shook his head. Instinct can change. That earned a stir. For thousands of years, Jake continued, voice gaining strength. Humans and dogs evolved together. They protected us. We fed them. We learned each other's signals. Over time, they didn't just tolerate us. They bonded with us. The speaker's light pulsed slowly. You claim emotional attachment overrides predatory drive. I claim, Jake said carefully, that connection reshapes behavior. A metallic delegate clicked angrily. Then why does your creature display dominance indicators? Jake frowned. What indicators? Forward eyes. Exposed teeth. Musculature designed for pursuit. Jake knelt beside Duke. Duke, he said softly, roll over. The dog immediately flopped onto his back, legs in the air, belly exposed. Apex predators did not expose their throats. The chamber erupted. Gasps. Shouts. Emergency murmurs. Jake scratched Duke's belly. Duke kicked happily. That, Jake said, standing again, is vulnerability. He's choosing it. Professor Galoon stepped forward. This behavior contradicts every known model of predator-prey psychology. Because you've never studied predators that were loved, Jake replied. Silence spread. The speaker leaned forward. Human, are there others like this creature on your world? Jake nodded. Millions. The chamber froze. Dogs, Jake continued, aren't unique. We keep cats, horses, birds of prey, even reptiles. A senator whispered, madness. Jake heard it. He didn't argue. Maybe, he said. Or maybe we just refuse to believe fear is the final answer. The speaker studied Duke for a long time. Would this creature, they asked slowly, defend you? Jake didn't hesitate. With his life. And you? Jake looked down at Duke. Without question. Something changed then. Not approval. Respect. The speaker raised one luminous hand. This assembly acknowledges that humanity's relationship with predatory species represents a unique adaptive strategy, one that may redefine interspecies cooperation. Murmurs turned into debate. Some senators demanded restrictions. Others demanded research partnerships. A few quietly suggested alliances. Jake stood still, heart pounding. He hadn't come to change the galaxy. But the galaxy was changing anyway. When the session adjourned, Zanara rushed toward him. You were incredible, she said, skin blazing gold. I was terrified, Jake admitted. Krellick approached next. The massive warrior knelt, an act that sent a shock through nearby delegations. You walked beside death, Krellick said, voice solemn, and taught it loyalty. Duke wagged his tail and licked Krellick's cheek. The warrior froze, then laughed. News spread faster than warp. Humans were no longer weak newcomers. They were something else entirely. A species that didn't conquer predators. They befriended them. That night, Jake returned to his dorm. He sat on the bed, Duke's head heavy on his knee. I think things are going to get complicated, Jake said quietly. Duke thumped his tail. Outside, the stars burned bright. And, across the galaxy, fear was slowly turning into curiosity. And curiosity into possibility. The days after the Senate session passed in a blur Jake could barely process. He returned to the academy, expecting things to settle down. Instead, they intensified. The guards outside his dormitory were no longer there to watch Duke. They were there to protect Jake. Not from the dog, but from the attention. Faculty members requested interviews. Researchers submitted proposals. Diplomats asked for private conversations under the excuse of cultural exchange. Jake started locking his door. Duke adjusted better than anyone. The dog followed him calmly through the halls, ignoring the whispers and sudden retreats. He didn't growl. He didn't posture. He simply existed, tail wagging, eyes alert, occasionally stopping to sniff something interesting on the floor like this was any other place in the universe. That normalcy unsettled everyone. Professor Rextel resumed classes with visible effort. The academy tried to return to routine, but routine had been permanently altered. Every lecture that involved human behavior now paused when Jake entered. Every discussion of predators eventually circled back to Earth. One afternoon, during a comparative survival strategies seminar, a student finally said it out loud. If humans bond with predators, a reptilian scholar asked, does that mean they are immune to fear? The room went quiet. Jake shook his head. No, we're terrified all the time. That answer confused them even more. Then why, another student pressed, would your ancestors approach wolves instead of eliminating them? Jake thought carefully. Because running doesn't always make fear go away. Sometimes understanding does. That phrase spread faster than he expected. Understanding instead of running. Zenara walked with Jake back to his dorm later that cycle. She stayed closer now, no longer flinching when Duke moved. Her lumen floated calmly beside her, no longer hiding. My people spent centuries building defenses, she said thoughtfully. Barriers. Warning systems. Automated extermination zones. Jake nodded. So did we. She tilted her head. But you still chose connection. Not all of us, Jake admitted. Some humans are afraid of dogs too. Some hurt animals instead of befriending them. We're not special because we're brave. We're special because some of us keep trying. That night, an emergency assembly was called. Not by the Academy. By the Defense Coalition. Jake stood in a smaller chamber this time, Duke at his side, while military representatives projected battle simulations into the air. Red icons clashed with blue fleets. We are not here to discuss pets, a coalition commander said bluntly. We are here to discuss doctrine. Jake stiffened. Doctrine. Your species has demonstrated an unprecedented capacity for integrating lethal organisms into cooperative frameworks, the commander continued. We want to know if this philosophy extends beyond animals. Jake's stomach dropped. You're asking if humans can be controlled, he said quietly. The room went still. Professor Galoon spoke sharply. That is not what was agreed upon. It is exactly what must be asked, the commander replied. If humans can coexist with predators, can they coexist with enemies? Jake felt Duke shift beside him, sensing tension. We don't tame enemies, Jake said. We stop fighting them. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Explain. Jake took a breath. We negotiate. We cooperate. We mess up. A lot. But history shows that humans form alliances faster than most species because we've had to. We're fragile. We don't survive alone. The commander leaned forward. Yet your species dominates its home world. Jake met his gaze. Because we learned how to work together. Not because we were the strongest. Silence followed. The coalition meeting ended without resolution, but Jake felt the shift. Humans were no longer being evaluated as students. They were being evaluated as a force. Later that night, Krellick visited again. This time without hesitation, without stiffness. He sat on the floor. Duke immediately approached him, tail wagging. I have been thinking, Krellick said, scratching Duke's neck with growing confidence. My people teach that strength comes from domination. Duke leaned into the touch. But domination breeds resistance, Krellick continued. You showed me something else. Jake smiled faintly. Trust works better. Krellick nodded. If humans had come to the galaxy as conquerors, we would have fought you. Hard. Perhaps destroyed you. Jake swallowed. But you came with a companion, Krellick said. That changes everything. News broke 3 cycles later. The Galactic Academy announced a new department. Interspecies Bonding and Cooperative Psychology. Human-led. Jake stared at the announcement in disbelief. I didn't apply for this, he muttered. Professor Rextel's mandibles clicked in what Jake now recognized as amusement. History rarely asks for permission. The galaxy wasn't just studying humans anymore. It was adapting to them. Jake sat on his bed that night, Duke's head resting on his thigh, fingers buried in warm fur. I don't know where this ends, Jake whispered. Duke looked up at him, eyes steady, trusting. Jake smiled. Guess we'll find out together. Outside, ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying new ideas across the stars. The age of fear was ending. Something else was beginning. The galaxy did not change all at once. It never does. What changed first was the way people looked at Jake when he entered a room. The fear was still there, but it was layered now, curiosity on top, then caution, then something closer to respect. Some species studied him like a puzzle. Others watched him like a warning. Humans, they were learning, were unpredictable in the most dangerous way possible. Jake felt the weight of it every day. The new department launched faster than anyone expected. Temporary lecture halls were converted. Observation rooms were reinforced. Entire research grants were rewritten overnight. The phrase human bonding model appeared in official documents, which made Jake feel deeply uncomfortable. He was still just a student. Duke, meanwhile, became the most studied organism in Academy history. Non-invasive scans, behavioral observation, chemical analysis of stress responses, everything short of turning him into a lab specimen. Jake refused that immediately. No cages, he said firmly to Professor Galoon. No restraints. No experiments that scare him. The professors argued. Jake didn't budge. And surprisingly, the galaxy listened. That alone frightened him more than anything else. Zanara volunteered to assist in the new department. She was one of the first non-humans willing to interact with Duke regularly. The first time she sat beside him without a table between them. Her skin glowed so brightly she had to dim herself. He chose to lie next to me, she whispered in awe. Jake smiled. That means he trusts you. The idea of being chosen by a predator became desirable. Students from cautious species began visiting the observation rooms. They stayed behind barriers at first, then closer. Then, slowly, some reached out. Duke accepted most of them calmly, ignoring the ones who radiated fear. He can sense it, Jake explained. He knows when someone's not ready. That, too, unsettled the galaxy. If a predator could read emotional intent better than advanced sensors, what did that say about human intuition? The Defense Coalition returned. This time, they were less aggressive. We are reassessing our doctrines, the commander admitted. Human integration strategies may offer alternatives to prolonged conflict. Jake crossed his arms. You don't integrate by force. The commander nodded. We are beginning to understand that. Outside the academy, things grew louder. Protests on some worlds. Fear broadcasts on others. Not everyone welcomed the idea of a species that slept beside apex predators. Some called humans reckless. Others called them manipulators. A few called them monsters. Jake read none of it. He didn't have time. The Senate issued another request. Not a demand this time. A conversation. Jake stood once more before the chamber, Duke steady at his side. You have shown us companionship, the speaker said. But companionship alone does not ensure peace. Jake nodded. Nothing does. Then why risk it? Jake thought about Ohio. About muddy fields. About Duke as a clumsy puppy chewing his shoes. About sleeping through storms because something warm and alive was nearby. Because isolation guarantees failure, Jake said. Connection at least gives us a chance. The chamber was silent. That answer spread faster than any data packet. Back at the academy, Krellick brought his Varric Hunter. Not into the dorms. Not into public spaces. Into the training yard. The creature trembled at first, eyes locked on Duke. Jake stayed still. Duke sat. No challenge. No aggression. Just calm. Slowly, impossibly, the Varric stopped shaking. It has never done that, Krellick said quietly. Jake nodded. Because no one ever showed it calm before. That moment became the turning point. Reports poured in. Predators responding to non-dominant handling. Stress levels dropping. Aggression decreasing. Not submission. Understanding. Jake sat with Duke that night, exhaustion heavy in his bones. They're changing things because of you, Jake murmured. Duke sighed contentedly. And I don't know if that scares me or makes me proud. Outside the window, the academy glowed softly against the stars. Ships came and went, carrying ideas that would ripple across civilizations. Humans were no longer the weakest species in the room. They were the ones who had learned to walk beside danger without becoming it. And the galaxy was paying attention. But Jake knew something no one else seemed to realize yet. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the test. Because soon, someone would ask the most dangerous question of all. Not whether humans could be trusted with predators, but whether predators could be trusted with humans. The question came sooner than Jake expected. It didn't arrive wrapped in fear or accusation. It arrived quietly, carried by a sealed Senate transmission marked with a priority code Jake had only seen once before. Emergency Cooperative Assessment. Jake sat on his bed, Duke's head resting on his knee as he read the message again. Outside his window, Velayer 7 hung in silent orbit, unchanged by the weight now pressing against his chest. A non-aligned border world had fallen into chaos. Not war collapse. Infrastructure failure. Food shortages. Civil unrest. Multiple species involved. None trusting the others enough to coordinate relief. The Senate had tried fleets. They had tried diplomats. They had tried force. Nothing held. And now, for the first time in recorded galactic history, the Senate had made a different request. They wanted humans. Not soldiers. Not weapons. Handlers. Jake stood in the central briefing chamber hours later, Duke at his side. Professor Galun was there, old eyes sharp with concern. Zanara stood nearby, her skin glowing with anxious patterns. Krellick loomed behind them, arms folded, unreadable. The speaker's image filled the air. "We are not asking you to intervene as a power," the speaker said carefully. "We are asking you to demonstrate whether your philosophy works beyond your world." Jake clenched his fists. "You're asking us to walk into a fractured system where fear controls everything." "Yes. And you think bringing humans will help?" The speaker paused. "We think bringing humans who walk beside predators might." Jake exhaled slowly. The deployment was small. Too small. A handful of human volunteers. Behavioral specialists. Aid coordinators. And Duke. Jake argued against bringing him. Duke didn't argue back. The border world was nothing like Earth. Harsh terrain. Thin atmosphere. Settlements built inward. Walls layered with defensive systems pointed at everything, including each other. When Jake arrived, the response was immediate. Shields activated. Weapons locked. Crowds scattered. Fear raw and absolute. Jake raised his hands. Duke stayed close, calm, unbothered by the targeting lasers tracking his movement. "We're here to help," Jake said into the translator field. No demands. No control. A local official stepped forward, shaking. "Your creature isn't here to hurt anyone," Jake interrupted gently. "Neither are we." They didn't believe him. Not at first. The first breakthrough wasn't dramatic. No speeches. No miracles. It was food. Jake sat on the ground in an open plaza, Duke beside him, sharing ration packs. When a hungry child crept close, Duke didn't move. He didn't stare. He simply existed, steady, warm, present. The child reached out, touched fur, didn't die. Word spread. Fear cracked. Over the next days, humans moved between groups no one else could reach. They didn't force cooperation. They listened. They waited. Duke became a constant, lying near supply points, walking calmly through tense negotiations, responding to anger with stillness. Predators understood stillness. So did people. Violence dropped. Not vanished, but slowed. And then something happened that no simulation had predicted. A riot broke out near a distribution hub. Panic surged. Weapons rose. Jake stepped forward before thinking. Duke followed. Jake knelt. In front of everyone. He placed his hand on Duke's head and bowed it forward, exposing his own neck. A human gesture of trust. A predatory vulnerability. The crowd froze. They understood that gesture in every language. If the human trusted the predator with his life, what did that say about fear? The riot ended without a single shot fired. The border world stabilized within weeks. Not perfectly, but enough. When Jake returned to the academy, the galaxy was different. Humans were no longer defined by weakness, nor by strength. They were defined by relationship. The Senate issued a final declaration. Humanity represents a unique stabilizing variable in interspecies systems. Their capacity to coexist with controlled danger suggests a framework for future cooperation. Jake didn't frame it. He went back to class. Duke went back to napping under desks. Zanara laughed more. Krellick trained differently. Professor Galoon rewrote half his life's work. And somewhere across the galaxy, species looked at the creatures on their own worlds with new eyes. Not as threats, not as tools, but as possibilities. Jake sat on his bed one night, Duke's breathing slow and steady beside him. "You know," Jake said softly, "they think we changed everything." Duke snorted in his sleep. Jake smiled. "We didn't," he whispered. "We just remembered something. That strength isn't domination. That courage isn't fearlessness. And that sometimes the bravest thing a species can do is reach out and trust something that could hurt them, and choose love anyway." The galaxy was vast. But for the first time, it felt a little less alone.